In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found No Proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm your host, Noah Nelson, and welcome to episode 422 of our ongoing exploration of the immersive cosmos and the first podcast episode of our 10th anniversary year here at NoPro. This week, we're very happy to have Eric Garcia and Kat Cole, co-directors of San Francisco's Detour, here to talk about what they have on tap for the first half of the year, including the Twilight Aristocracy, a workshop production coming up in March of a companion piece to last year's hit We Build Houses Here, and the devised theater and drag workshop series that the company is running this month. We'll have all that in a moment, but first, speaking of this month, to celebrate our 10th anniversary, we're holding meetups in New York City and LA on the same night, January 29th at the Cell Theater in Manhattan and at the Roguelike Tavern in Burbank. Tickets for both will be pay what you can, and we strongly encourage RSVPs for both venues in the form of those tickets because we hit capacity on our last round of meetups. Those tickets are available right now. Check the show notes for links. You'll also find me this weekend at Worlds in Play, the gathering at Arizona State University's Mix Center in Mesa this weekend. I just said this weekend twice. 3 times. That's the event that Scarlett Kim announced at our last meetup in LA back in October. What will get announced at this meetup? Swing through and find out. NoPro backers get first crack at tickets to these things and access to our Discord where you can connect with fans and creators, including those who are attending Worlds in Play and who are at last year's Immersive in Denver, the next stage in LA, and at SummerSlam. Oh wait, sorry. Wrong universe. Head over to patreon.com/NoProscenium for the hookup. As always, big thanks to our sustaining backers, Samuel Mystery, Chris Woolman, Samantha Davison, Eric Shamlin, Elaine, Daryl, John Boulette, Cameo Wood, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Genties, Kurt Collins, Ryan, David Bassick, Richard Ayers, Lonnie Hands-On, Lecker LaCool, the Ministry of Peculiarities, and Jan Budman. Thank you all. And hey, we're always on the lookout for community partners who are up for working out special deals for our backers. Hit me up at noah@noproscenium.com for details, and let's get you into WrestleMania. Wait, again, wrong universe. All right, well, I'm going to recalibrate my AWE matrix here, but let's check out what's going on in San Francisco this month and in March with our friends at Detour. Joining us today are Erica Garcia and Kat Cole, co-directors of Detour, the San Francisco-based performing arts company whose website says everything you need at a glance in big, bold letters. Devised theater, dance, drag, immersive. In 2023, they brought us We Build Houses Here, and this March, they will be workshopping a new production, The Twilight Aristocracy. This month, January, for those who are listening at some other point in history, January 2024, the company is offering a series of workshops on devised theater and drag performance. We're going to talk to them about all of this. Kat and Eric, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having us, Noah.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Very, very, very happy to have you both. Parker is already ecstatic beyond. And is probably blushing now that I called Parker out.
We love Parker.
Doubled. Yeah. Parker's dying of embarrassment at this very moment, probably at their new job. So they're still working with us. They also have a new job. So before we get into the bulk of the interview, Kat, we've been graced by Eric's presence before on the show, but this is your first time here. So tell us a bit about you and your road to being part of Detour.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Well, Eric and I met in college, actually. And that's been, how long has it been, Eric? I can't
Since
count at this point.
2009, since 2008.
Yeah, 2009. So Eric jokes in a good way that we are each other's longest relationship, so to speak. Arts collaborators since 2009. And I think, we were both students at University of San Francisco, and I, um, was interested in the performing arts. I was in a public high school in Hawaii that was performing arts centered, and I was the actor in the musical theater who couldn't sing but who could say lines, and so I would do that and got into dance through that, and um, kind of fell into the USF Performing Arts and Social Justice program, which at the time was a minor for me, and I think I really got into the dance program there. I think specifically because it had a devised theater approach, and that was something really new to me. Previously, my assumptions of dance specifically was kind of repertoire, ballet background kind of thing, and for me, as someone who I have a deformed left foot, I can't do ballet, quite frankly speaking. And that was never accessible to me. So there was something about the devised theater aspect of the program at USF through dance that actually made it feel like, oh, I can have a voice in this. I can cultivate, whatever artistic practice that I want, and it doesn't have to fit a certain kind of standard, so to speak. And so that's really what drew me into performance at that age, and that's where me and Eric met. I saw him do a solo piece, he saw me do a solo piece. We were both like, oh, who's that person from across the room? And we're kind of match made by our professor at the department, Amy Dowling, who has a practice going back to Liz Lerman, and kind of is from that lineage of creating dance and community-based performance. And so she kind of match made us together, and Eric and I have been making pieces, works together since then. And I think the immersive element kind of came up for us within the last 5 or 6 years, and kind of grew just out of our own growth personally as human beings in this world, trying to make an impact, and as our interests progressed, and yeah, we've been kind of experimenting with that form since our first production back in 2017.
I'll dig. I think I'll dig really deep later when we're talking about the devised workshop, about what you've brought forward from your USF days. But before we go into that section, which I think is going to be where we spend a lot of time, to serve everyone's listening, we're going to get not academic nerdy, but practicinium nerdy. Eric, I take it We Build Houses Here was enough of a success for you that you're back at the immersive grind again. So what's cooking with the Twilight Aristocracy and this workshop process you're doing with it?
Yeah, Lord have mercy. I'm still glowing from We Build Houses Here. It was such a beautiful project and process. And I mean, the ego stroke of sold out run is just, I mean, a drag queen wants nothing more. So I'm just like still glowing from that whole project. And as Kat and I were thinking of like what the next project was, we were, a lot was sort of like floating up in the air. Is it remounting We Build Houses Here? Is it trying to find a building to build a new show in? Is it workshopping? So there was a lot of things that we were chatting about, and for a variety of reasons, the workshopping of a new piece sort of made the most sense. And we were like, okay, what would make most sense energetically and financially in this limited amount of time? Because as a reminder, We Build Houses Here took about 1.5 years to make. And at this point, if we wanted to have a show happen in the spring, we were already behind. So it was like, okay, so like with this limited amount of time, what's possible? And so it really began with this idea of like, okay, with these limited resources and limited time, let's take We Build Houses Here as a starting place, and let's build the prelude to We Build Houses Here. So the Twilight Aristocracy, as of now, which doesn't exist yet, we're going to be starting rehearsals very soon. The idea is that it's a secret society of queers, and we have a meeting space, which is at the General's residence at Fort Mason Center for Arts and Culture in San Francisco. And folks that are coming to this show are a part of our secret society, and the meeting is somewhat of a goodbye party, because the secret society found an island not far from SF that looks identical to SF, but it's a little better, a little more utopic. Little do we know that we will get shipwrecked en route to this island. But the idea is that this whole show is the scheming up of this escape to a better place through this, like, the inner workings of this like clandestine operation with a bunch of like queer self-determined elites. So yeah, that's the beginnings of the ideas that we're playing with now. And the building itself, like I said, is at the General's residence, which is like a 3-story mansion in the Fort Mason Center, and it is just, there's so much character. I mean, it's night and day from building a show in a nightclub at Oasis in Soma, and now we're in this like extremely historic old building with so many rooms and nooks and crannies, and it's really, really special.
Are they being hella precious with what you can and can't do in this space? Because I know sometimes as historic, it can be like, oh, all the furniture's, we've picked it out special, so no one touch it, or is it a space that you're really getting a chance to play with? I mean, I'm not going to tear apart the walls or anything like that.
Yeah, no. We love Fort Mason. They're being really amazing, and they've been really clear with us that the space is like a historically preserved site, and it's like owned by the National Park Services, and they have, I don't know if this was for us specifically, but I giggled when I got the contract. There's a little line item in the many-page contract that's bold and italicized, and it says "no glitter." And I was like, okay, calm down.
You probably need to put that like into the ticketing thing too. Like, there's a friend of mine who, like,
point.
Yeah. There's a friend of mine, anytime I'm like within 5 feet of her, I know I'm going to be like glittered. Yeah. So I just accept that. It's funny. They did a production of Fefu and Her Friends here in LA at the Hollyhock House, which is like a Frank Lloyd Wright. It's actually a UNESCO heritage site. Like, It's been deemed that. And so we had to wear little booties, like those little crime scene booties. We had to put them on our shoes to like walk around it. So like I've been where it's been like, no, really, don't get your filthy outside dirt on our precious heritage site. Yeah. But it's also wonderful. I mean, there's nothing like getting to be in one of those spaces as either an audience member or an artist, because they talk. Right. They start suggesting things to you in a real way. So that's super exciting.
Yeah. We're super excited to be there.
So you've got a series of workshops coming up this month, like I said at the top, and it culminates in a 2-day devising immersive theater workshop that both of you are facilitating. Kat, I wonder if you could tell us about the bones of this one, and then from there, I'm just going to start peppering you both with questions.
Yeah, for sure. So Eric and I are leading, as you said, a workshop in devising a scene, and it's over the course of 2 days. I think six hours each day.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a kind of creative consultation with me and Eric and two of our company members who are part of houses and who will be there to kind of help us facilitate. And it was just great to both feel like there's so much that we could share and that also doesn't fit in just 12 hours. And so how do we structure all of that? And I think where and to also preface, I think, to Eric, you can correct me if this has changed, but a lot of the folks who are coming to our workshop, I think by nature of us, being really tied to the dance world, a lot of folks are dancers too coming in. Maybe it's their first time learning about immersive theater practices. So I think it was geared towards like a really kind of 101 a bit into theater a bit as well as, immersive practices. And so the first day is more around like the structure of a scene, not necessarily thinking about it in a 360 environment yet, not really thinking about the environment quite yet, but just how to create a scene with other tools that might not just be like starting with movement or with improvisation, which a lot of us as dancers can go to first when making something. So we're talking about like crescendos, like building a crescendo in a scene, a beginning and middle and end, and how you come in with that, or how to enter a scene with, a certain mindset or assumption about a person, and how does that change in your interaction? How do you exit the scene? Thinking about entrances and exits. So really kind of just like tools just for scene making in general. And also giving us time to share feedback with each other around what worked and what didn't, which I think the workshop is trying to model how we build collectively as an ensemble when we're working on scenes. And that was something super integral that I experienced as a performer in houses, is that, it's not all just Eric, not all of us leaning on Eric to create the vision, to create the beats for us, to give us all the feedback. We were working as an ensemble to lean on each other's expertise for what worked. And so having a lot of space, we want to have a lot of space in the workshop itself for the participants of the workshop to also share, hey, this is what worked for me, or here's an idea, and that being, simply put, like really non-hierarchical about who can offer feedback, right? And that it can be a collective process. So that's kind of day one in a very short nutshell. And then day two is then, okay, how do we, think about it now in an immersive context? So thinking about different levels of engagement with the audience. How do you want to set up the environment for them, for their experience? What is like the event that you would like to happen into interaction with an audience? How do you think about the environment? So, that's again a lot to put into day two. And we're still kind of in the process of like figuring out how to exactly break that up. But we're thinking about, gaze, even just gaze, or how you look at an audience member as like a first connection. And, even just that as a preliminary interaction, even before you, build up to maybe offering your hand or offering to move them to move into a different space with them. But, really trying to think of like these really the smaller moments of engagement that can then build trust with an audience, and trying to introduce that idea.
I love that, because like oftentimes when we're talking about this stuff, we'll talk about like thresholds and like, the magic circle and, onboarding the audience, and there's so many different forms of immersive, right? So like there can be like sort of the sandbox, sort of the audience is kind of a ghostly presence moving through, and there's others where the audience is the protagonist. So then the first thing is just figuring out, okay, like how deep, how much control, how much agency are they going to have? But then I think back to my own, like the thing that made me fall in love with the form was, a little moment in Then She Fell, Third Rail's piece, which I know you both know Third Rail, and I've worked with folks from them, of just being invited to the tea party in that. And, it's a look, it's a word, it's that little tiny moment, or just someone catching your eye, or like, yeah, those little buildup points that suggest there could be something more, that also gives the performers a chance to read the audience and figure out, oh, does this person want to play or not? Or is this person like just kind of closed off? And it's like, okay, we'll find someone else to play with. You don't want to be pulled in. So I love focusing on that. That's really where who are you borrowing from for all of this? Because you've got the USF practice, you've played around with the folks from Third Rail, you have what you've got out of your own company in terms of devising this work. Like I'm sure the answer is like all of it, but like what do you find yourself leaning on in terms of elements of the practice here, as you're trying to find a way to introduce these concepts to people in that kind of workshop class format?
Definitely. There's a few things that come to mind. I mean, to sort of back up Kat's sort of breakdown of the 2 days, there's something seemingly daunting around how do you codify, or how do you teach or share tools around this like extremely dynamic experience where there's so much at play. You could have everything memorized perfectly, and then it takes one audience member doing something that you did not plan for, and you're like, cool, there goes everything out the window. So how do you teach reactivity? How do you teach, that sort of like improvisation? How do you teach the intuition to like trust the roadblocks that you've built in a scene? That kind of stuff is really hard, but I'm a stubborn person, and I feel like there are actual like tools. There are specific like things inside of the craft that can anchor some choice making, and I feel like a lot of those tools that I've developed as a director really lie in the like Lecoq method of like physical theater. We trained Detour brought on Emmanuel Delpeche from Pig Iron Theater in Philadelphia, who is an expert in physical theater and clowning, and devised theater. And so she talks a lot about like Kat was saying, there's a lot in there around touch and gaze and tension and proximity, these like really basic things that you can actually exercise and try out in a workshop setting. So then you're like, oh, this is what like the degrees of intensity are with touch and gaze and tension, and how that might impact the objective of my scene. So it feels like we reference a lot of what Pig Iron does with Lecoq. We're going to be training actually in a month with Del Arte, up in Northern California. They're coming down to SF to train with us, and they're another prime example of like a group that really centers ensemble creators. They do a lot of mask work, right? Commedia dell'arte. So if the face is neutralized, how does the body express? And I feel like there's so much, I think that's why dancers really gravitate towards immersive theater, because there is so much body knowledge, and people are clocking that, whether they're conscious of it or not, they're clocking the signals that the performer is doing with their body. And it takes a really intelligent performer to be that aware of what their body is telling the audience to do. So I feel like there's a lot of stuff in there that is that can be broken down in this sort of like, hey, let's bring your body to a level 0 tension. Okay, now bring it to a 7, right? And then to Kat's point, and then how do you make that immersive? So like, how does the environment around you start to match that? How do you try to bring the environment in that same consideration? I think that's where it starts to go into this immersive place. Some of the other like points of reference that we have, I feel like I've just been such a nerd about Frantic Assembly in the UK. I feel like there's such I associate them with like when I was graduating college. Like I have their books. They do such incredible physical theater, and they have a really beautiful pedagogy around creating work as an ensemble. Some of it now to me it feels really proscenium heavy. Like it is really geared towards a stage. And so part of me is like some of these things don't resonate as much anymore. But as far as like an ensemble skill building, they have like incredible resources for how to like get a group working together and how to be like, okay, you want to make a show about this idea. There's a bajillion ways you can go about it. So here are some like things that you can shoot that idea through physically to get your ideas pumping as a group, and how to like split up a room of people to be like, all right, you 5 groups now generate scenes and let's see what happens. And so I feel like Frantic Assembly has a lot of amazing resources out there that I tap into.
I'm like taking notes on cards and just like this is like fantastic. It's like this is a little seminar that I've tricked you both into like giving me.
We will send you an invoice after this for the fee.
No, I'll send you a marketing invoice. No,
right, exactly.
It'll be the exact same amount. Invoices in the night. So
the invoice is a ticket to the show.
Yeah,
exactly. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh, wow. I hope I can get my butt up there. Like travel situation is interesting right now, but right now I'll go on the record. This is not just me like, blowing smoke. Like if I could for this like 6 month, if I could pick one thing that I could definitely like run off and go do under my own power, it'd be to like catch this workshop production y'all are doing. Cause Parker was so over the moon with the We Build Houses here, and just seeing from the start of how y'all were talking about the work, like, it just got my spider senses tingling. Like I knew there's like a thought and a care to the practice and a granularity because, there's a lot of folks who take stabs at doing immersive work. And sometimes it winds up being kind of like when people are trying to make like a team lab art installation when all they've seen is like Instagram photos of a team lab art installation. And so they're like, oh yeah, we can do this. Someone told me how Sleep No More is. And you're like, yeah, it's not the same. And then, but to hear, one of the reasons why I'd say this feels like a seminar is like, you're dropping some names and I'm like, wait a second, like that's familiar. Oh, right. This is what so-and-so said. I was literally like checking, it's like oh, Liz Lerman. Wasn't that what Shannon sent me something from there? And like, is she at ASU right now, or I'm about to go visit? So it's that little part of my brain is like clicking together, and it starts to feel like, oh yeah, there's this order to this universe that is often kind of obscured to everyone, even everyone who's inside the practice, like just don't know where all the lineages are coming to, and y'all are working out on this edge and managing to kind of smelt things, like forge things together. That's not really a question. It's just this observation.
Yeah. It was what Eric was saying too. It's something that it's not codified for me yet, but I was interested in this question as we were building houses. That we were, for that, one of the contributing directors was Cornelius, who comes from the drag world and theater, and was so interested in kind of, I think Cornelius is really working in interesting ways to kind of codify what drag does, what that offers. And, Eric and I both also being in that world, and I've just been kind of evaluating, like, yeah, how drag has challenged and made me grow as a performer, as a responsive performer, as a performer attuned to what the audience is giving me, to what the audience might be down to do with me in the moment. And I haven't
Mm.
decided, I haven't like preordained what that is, you know? But I think there's something about that practice too that feels exciting to continue exploring, especially with, yeah, with the community of artists that we get to, have the benefit of being with, who also, some of them come from a drag practice. And I feel like there is some oh my gosh, overlap, but some kind of feeding of each other within immersive world and drag, that I feel like that's where I come in sometimes with it. And there isn't like formality to the practice yet, or a way to like teach that in a sense, but it's just an exciting edge for me to continue thinking about as we kind of keep going down both of those worlds.
Janine from Third Rail, Janine Willett, is an angel. She came over to SF and led us in a workshop, as you mentioned earlier, Noah. And she shared this idea that really stuck with me. And it was this idea that in maybe more proscenium style work, the artist and their ego is the thing. That's the thing we have to care about. If they're not feeling the performance, we don't feel the performance. In immersive worlds, the audience's ego has to be the thing. And so the craft and the design that goes into a scene, you have to, she talked about, like, I may be putting words in her mouth, but it was like death to the like artist's ego, basically. It's like, that is like, that can't be the thing that drives a scene. Is like,
Mm-hmm.
is my whole scene going to be witnessed? Is it entertaining? Is it like, am I looking good doing this? Is it interesting? Like, all of that stuff doesn't matter if the audience isn't with you. And to Kat's point, it feels like that, like, drag has this like without having named it prior to this, like, there are things baked into that art form that are more in line with that, where it's like, yes, at surface level, it's like, I got dolled up, I'm asking for affirmation. Like, on surface level, there is that ego, right? But beyond that, like, the engagement that happens on stage is so different. It's like so directional with the audience.
Mm-hmm. And
It's not,
intimate, it
yeah,
feels like. Sorry. Yeah.
yeah, totally. So there's like, the rules of engagement are so different, and it really informs how you then move forward in that number or in that, on that
Mm-hmm.
stage. And that's what I feel like is so like, I'm like, what are those things? Like, how can you like take those lessons and then infuse that into something that is more dance based or text based, that has, like, if you think about like what a dancer has to do when they memorize choreography, and there's a bunch of people on the other side of the room, they're like, okay, like, execute this thing, and I'm going to put in all of my like dance class training into making sure that this looks impeccable and interesting, and I'm going to make sure that I feel something and I'm clear on my journey inside of these series of steps, versus like, okay, there's like, I'm at a table and there's like 4 strangers sitting at this table with me and we're about to have a seance. So what do I have to do to get this audience on board with me, versus me having like a full-blown like moment and they're just like watching me and not engaged. So it
Mm-hmm.
feels like there's just like, I mentioned this before, but it feels just like the tools are infinite there. The research is infinite there. And that's, I feel like drag is that like really beautiful bridge where it's like, whether we knew it or not, there's some stuff in there that we're mining.
So one of the things about drag is when it comes to like, the wattage of the performance, it like starts at a level that is like sort of beyond where, even like
Mm-hmm.
the biggest traditional theatrical might go. And then, so where does it else have to go except back into like something more intimate and into connecting, right? It's taken as a giving. Yeah, this is going to be a spectacle, but what's beyond spectacle,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's really kind of fascinating that like it starts to like cycle into these, more interactive, more responsive. Like Kat, you said you responsive, and like that was such, that so bells off in my mind about just way to like think of what is a performer doing in the space, right? Responding and all the relational things that have to happen. And then, and Eric, when you were talking about the dance performance, I was thinking about, yeah, for a lot of choreographers, it's like, can I get their lines right? Like, how geometric is this? Or they're thinking in terms of like, relationships between the dancers and how that's creating shapes and proximity, like vibes, but then opening it out to the audience and how are they part of that web of physical relationships until things are completely decentered, right?
Mhm.
It's like
Mm-hmm.
the the artist ego can't be involved because every ego is being lit up all over the
Mhm.
room, right?
Something that's also really fun to think about too, and like that it's hard to overlook, is like within 5 seconds a drag performer wins. Like the second the curtain opens, everyone is clapping for them. So, like everyone is 100% with them.
True. Captive
So
audience.
yeah, the effort to like get an audience with you is virtually none. It's like
Mm-hmm.
by
Mm-hmm.
virtue of the curtain opening, I have you eating out of the palm of my hand. Versus in dance performance, to get somebody to clap for you, or to, if you were to break the fourth wall, it's cringy. It's like, oh God, ugh.
Oh
So
yeah.
like a drag performer, like once the curtain opens, you have earned so much trust for whatever freaking reason. That's just the rules of that space. And so there's so much power in that. And it's really curious to me. I'm like, why is that the case? That the second a drag performer walks out, you're already granted all of these permissions within reason, right? Like that you can like squat down and reach your hand out and someone's going to give you $1, or someone's like wants to jump on stage with you and dance with you. Like that does not, you're not afforded that in a lot of other spaces. So like what is that? That's very curious to me. And I love trying to like fold that into our like more quote unquote contemporary, like our immersive productions that you have to buy a ticket to, that kind of culture setting feels really fascinating and really effective for getting people on board.
You talked a little bit about who's coming to the workshop, to this one, and maybe just, I also want to think about to all of the workshops that you're putting on for this month, who you're seeing coming, what it's sort of telling you about the state of the performing arts community in San Francisco at the moment. Because from the outside of SF looking in, like, I'm from the Bay. The Bay looms large in my imagination, I think, in terms of the cultural impact that San Francisco has across a couple of different spheres. It still has this outside impact compared to like how actually big the Bay Area is. And other times I look in and I'm like, is anything really happening there? And one of the things that's been exciting about watching your company pop up on the Immersive radar has been like, oh yeah, like things are happening in the Bay again in a real way, and not just from the Burning Man set, right? Like it's like, oh, we can reliably expect that there's immersive stuff happening in the Burning Man set, but then there's other parts of the Bay that are kind of lining up. So how do things look in terms of the creative community in the Bay right now, at least from the perspective that you have of who's coming through and who's showing interest in the workshops you're putting on?
I'll say that with this workshop intensive series, this is our first time offering anything like this. And I was talking to Kat a couple days ago. I'm just like so floored at the response. Like I was expecting a small handful of folks to be interested in this, but we have over 65 folks that have reached out and have signed up for this intensive series. And I'm just like, whoa, like so exciting. And the range of folks, there's 4 workshops over 5 days. There's writing for devised theater with Brian Thorstensen. There's drag makeup with Mud, the Two Spirit. There's drag performance and stage presence and choice making as a drag artist with Lisa Frankenstein. And then Kat and I are doing the 2-day devising immersive theater workshop. And so the range of folks is exactly what we want. It's exactly who we're trying to cultivate in our performance spaces and our workshops. So the majority of people, I would say, are like either drag artists that are like starting to expand their practice into this maybe more theatrical or movement-based approach. And then there's a lot of like movement-based artists, dancers that are starting to be like, what does like scene, like whenever I talk about scenes to dancers, to like, oh, what? Like that, like it's just like, you mean a section? I'm like, no, a scene. Like the elements that go into a scene are different than like a dance section. And so I feel like there's that growth edge there for dancers. And there's also just like, you know, Kat and I will go on for days about this, but like there's drag is hypnotizing. People are just like really curious to like embody that and to be inside of that practice. So there's a lot of folks that are like, I am just very curious to be in this makeup workshop and just to like find out what my persona is and see what happens to my physicality when I have a face full of insane makeup. Like that is a very luring thing for folks. So the workshop, really, the series is bringing a ton of folks together that I don't think would otherwise be taking a workshop together, to be honest with you. And it's exciting. And in general, I feel, based off of how houses went, you know, we have such a, you know, we only have our perspective, right? But it feels like there's a hunger for this type of performance to be happening. There's been such an amazing turnout and sort of community that has been built from that show. And I can't help but feel like that folks are really craving more of that here. From a performer perspective, like I know tons of performers that are like, if you need a job, let me know. Like there's that happening. There's audiences that are like, when's the next show? Or like, what other things like that are happening? Kat and I are kind of like scratching our heads like, well, when we find out more, well, you know, like people are starting to do like their sort of immersive projects at varying scales, you know, but Kat and I are really trying to like what does going big look like here in the Bay? Like, how does like moving into a building or taking over these experiences really like making an impact in the economy here in the city, into the art landscape here? Like that feels like the kind of splash we want to be making, and not just the sort of like putting all of our effort into creating like a weekend long thing that our closest friends can benefit from. So we're trying to like reach a larger pool of folks with these like bigger splashes, you know. I don't know, Kat, if you have any reflections on
Yeah.
who's coming out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking also about like other theater movement and devised folks that we know who have also been in practice in some ways with like site-specific shows and immersive
Totally.
in varying degrees. Like Seth Eisen has done, you know, multiple walking tours out in the world, in North Beach, in the Haight, in Soma, and Jenny McAllister with 13 Floors doing like immersive theater at the Mint. And so it feels like, okay, there are, you know, other folks that we know that we've been in conversation with who are doing things like this. And it also, I'm tying that with also, like Eric was saying, Detour has been bringing in expertise from other parts of the states, you know. And I think with this workshop, we're trying to provide like access to kind of professional conversations around immersive theater and practice, and offer that to San Francisco, because it doesn't feel like that kind of education or learning from each other, there hasn't been an avenue for that, you know. Like Eric has been bringing in guest artists because we don't have that kind of knowledge or access to that knowledge locally. And so I think that this workshop has been the kind of first experiment in just offering access to that kind of knowledge, you know, to that kind of conversation, because there hasn't been quite that train. You have to go elsewhere to to get that knowledge, to get that training.
Well, and it feels like this is a really fantastic moment for this kind of thing to be happening in the Bay, and for what you've done to like bring these folks in. And I got to say, like, not a lot of folks do bring in outside practitioners. Like we did some of that in LA, you know, pre-pandemic, and that was always like pretty successful. Like we had Third Rail come out, you know, once, and there was also some folks like in town that we were starting to like build up, you know, get them to share some of their practice. And I've become more and more aware of, what it takes to codify this stuff, and who can actually sort of teach, or what practices, what people would get excited about if we like brought somebody in, from somewhere. Um, and and then watching when you do when you do a workshop series or you do a one-off, how that often then echoes out and you get people experimenting and doing more work. Or we do this thing called the Invitational here, where we kind of do a 48-hour film festival, like of just devising immersive pieces that just like
Mhm.
really quick and dirty. It's just like start on Friday, show on Sunday, done.
Yeah, love
And
it.
and some great stuff has emerged from that, like some real surprising, and just giving people the space and the time to play. And then what can come after that can be really incredible. So I'm so grateful that you're doing the workshops, that you're taking this approach to the work, that you're taking the time to bring people in, and being just so damn thoughtful about how to forge this. Because like that that low and slow cooking like is what often makes the most spectacular work. And it's just such a relief to know that someone's working on that time scale. And I think I may have intimated some of that stuff before, but I just want to reiterate that, like it is really good to see the way in which you're working on all this stuff.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we feel very like juiced and like fed by this type of work. Like you were saying earlier, it's like nerding out on this stuff. Like that is so how we view this practice, and we love being in community with folks, spending time like mapping out the agenda for the workshop and spending like hours being like, what is this Twilight Aristocracy show? Like, what are the characters? What are the rooms? What like we love doing that, and then bringing it down into the community level where it's like this, we want to create our ecosystem, we want to create the sort of like the space for us to celebrate each other and to like skill share, like Kat said so beautifully. Like it just it there's a clear space for us to fill in, and we're really fed by this work. So yeah, thanks for the shout out.
Of course. Well, thank you both for kicking off the new year of episodes with us this week. And I'm encouraging everyone, is there still space left in any of the workshops? Or are you sold out at this point?
There's if you're good to us, you can send us a little message, but
Okay.
we're effectively sold out. But if you're nice, you can send us a little message.
All right. Only if you're nice, send a little message. If you're nice and good and desperate. Other than that, something tells me maybe you'll end up doing something like this again in the not too distant. So, and everyone should keep an eye on that, and also keep an eye on what's going on with the Twilight Aristocracy. So, Kat, Eric, thank you both so much.
Thank you, Noah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Noah. Happy New Year.
Once again, I want to thank Kat and Eric for being our guests on the show this week. Check out everything that Detour has going on at DetourDance.com. You'll also find that in the show notes, along with links to the meetups and all the other stuff that's going on right now. You might be listening to this walking around Worlds in Play. Don't know why you'd be doing that, but if for some reason you are, come say hi to me. Or hopefully you did say hi to me. Maybe you're listening to this after you were at Worlds in Play, and you're like, oh yeah, I said hi to Noah. Well, this is me telling you to tell past you. See, it's a little loop there. And I'm in this weird bouncy mood because I'm recording this at like 10 o'clock at night on Tuesday because it's a travel week and yada yada. And I don't know. I the whole bit where I like ad-libbed about SummerSlam just got me all jazzed up. I don't know why. It just I was looking at, I'll tell you why. I was looking at all the stuff we've done. I'm looking at the stuff we're about to do. I'm looking at the stuff that we're going to be able to announce soon. And it just started to feel like like it was the wrestling calendar. Oh man. Maybe I watched a fair amount of Dark Side of the Ring over the break. Um, I also played Alan Wake 2 over the break, which is absolutely incredible. And I wish I could get the people at Remedy on the show. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I should just try. I should just try, really. Because there's a whole, like, there's kind of a reference to Sleep No More in the whole thing. There's a whole level set in an immersive theater venue. I'll put it that way. And just the way they play with space and time and just thinking about stuff, it's very much an us thing. And that game is very much a me thing. I've long loved the games from the folks at Remedy. So that goes a long way there too. All right, enough of that. Let's get you into the rest of your weekend or week or whenever it is you might be listening to this. And I will see you back here, the next time you download. The associate producer of this podcast is Parker Sella. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society and Solar the Podcast. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro. The No Pro Podcast is written, edited, hosted, produced, and mixed by yours truly. I'm Noah Nelson, and until next time, I'll see you at the show.